Okay, so let's start with the basics, because when you open up GIMP, it can be very overwhelming, right? But it doesn't have to be, and that's what this video is about. Now, I didn't rehearse this video at all. I didn't write anything down, so we're just going to go with the flow. So first, let me grab a notepad and let's write some things down, okay? So what would you use GIMP or Photoshop for? Well, maybe it's to separate a person from the background. In other words, maybe you just want to cut yourself out and then use that in a thumbnail, right? Maybe you want to add things to the image, or maybe you have an image and you want to add text. And then maybe you want to touch up an image, which can be done in several ways, of course. So these are usually the things people use Photoshop for, and I will be addressing some of these here. Okay, let's close this down. So first, let's start by going to Edit and then go to Preferences. This is where you can change all the settings for GIMP, right? So if you have a different theme, for instance, you can go over here to Theme, and then you've got Dark, Gray, Light System. So let me show you the difference. This is dark, for instance. I actually like this one. And you can change the icon theme as well to color or to legacy, for instance. That will change the icons over here. Okay, I'm going to use color. And if you just want to go back, you can click reset as well. Other settings can be found here as well, which I won't address in this video. But if you're searching for something, it's probably over here. Let's click OK. So you start with this. You don't have any canvas, you don't have your photo. And you can go to a folder and then right mouse button and then open with and then select GIMP. And that will automatically open up the photo here in GIMP. Or you can go to File and then open up one of your images that you want to work with. Now, if you don't have anything, you want to start from scratch. Let's say you want to build a thumbnail. You can go to File and then go to New. And then this pops up. Now this asks you what you want to use. Now you have templates that you can use for, let's say, an A4 paper or an A5 paper or business cards or whatever you would like. So always be sure to check it out over here. And then you can also enter it manual. Now this is set to full HD, but you can also change it to, let's say, 1080 by 1080 if you want to create something for Twitter or Instagram, for instance. Or you can say, look, I want a vertical thing. We can make this 1080 by 9020, right? Now I'm going to make this full HD again. And then we've got the advanced options, which you can change color space, things like precision. So 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit. So the higher, the more quality you have. You can select the color profile. So the built-in sRGB from GIMP, or you can use one from the disk. And then I like to use either background color to fill it with or transparency. Now, if you use background color, and you can change the comment as well, but if you use the background color, it will automatically open up a canvas using the color you have selected right here. Now, by default, it's black and white. So yours will be either black or white. Right. Now, if that's something you don't want to, because you want a blank canvas, you can go back to File, New, and then go to Advanced Options and then change the fill width from background color to transparency. Click OK. And now we've got a transparent canvas to work with. What's important to know is that on the left hand side, you have all the tools that you will need to use for your image. And then on the right hand side, you have things like letter type, document history, gradients used. And then over here, you have something like edit this gradient, create a new gradient. And if you go to the letter type, you can actually renew this. So if you download a font that you don't have just yet, you can just renew it rather than opening and closing GIMP, and it will pop up in this list. Okay. Then here we have the layers menu. Here we have the channels menu. So the red, green, blue, and the alpha channel. And then over here we have the paths menu. Now this will show a path once we've created a path, but I will show you that in a minute. Now, if you want to add a new layer, because that's basically what you use GIMP for, you edit photos, you add layers, you change things, then you need to add layers, because sometimes you change something on one part of the image and then you need to change something else again. You create a new layer. Now you can create a new layer by clicking this button, create a new layer, or if you want to duplicate the layer, you can click it over here. Now let's say we've got a couple of layers, and I'm going to call this 1, I'm going to call this 2, 3, 4, and then the background, I'll keep this as is. Usually we call this the original layer. So we always start with an original image, then we duplicate it, and then we move up from there, okay? Now let's say you don't like the order of this because you have text over here, which we can create by clicking this symbol text tool. I'm going to change the color to white. I'm going to click here and call it tutorial. Let's select everything by hitting Control A, and then let's increase the font size. Here we go, tutorial. And now the tutorial's on the top. Well, if we have this layer and we want to fill this layer with a color to make it more easier to understand. So we're going to click the bucket tool. I'm going to use black for the contrast. So now we've got the layer, which is now filled with the black color. And we have the tutorial above the black layer, which means that the tutorial is now visible. But let's say you want to move this down. You can by dragging this downwards. Or what you can do is you can click these symbols to move it down or to move it up. Now, if you have something that is filling the screen completely, like this black canvas over here, that will mean that the tutorial word in this case is no longer visible, right? Now, let's say you want to have this visible because you want to work on this, but you want to keep these layers and you don't want to switch them up all the time. You can actually deactivate or activate the layers by clicking on this eye symbol. So that will either remove it temporarily or bring it back. Now, make sure before you export your image that all the eyes are active, so that all the layers are active that you want to see inside of your image. Now, going back to the text, because that's something we're going to use in this tutorial as well. You can add in text effects, okay? Now what you could do is you could click here and then you can rotate it. So this is for the rotation. You can do this by clicking your mouse wheel button and just dragging it all the way around, or you can move this slider and that will have the same effect. Now we've got a rotation tool, we've got a scale tool, so you can actually scale it up by hitting Control Shift, because that will scale it up from the middle, or scale it down. Now, I don't really like to do this because this will probably mess up with the quality a bit. So what I like to do when scaling text is just go back to the text tool, click inside the text box, hit Control A so everything is selected again, and then just make it bigger, because that's much easier and that will look much better, and that won't mess around with the pixels. Then we've got a shear tool. So if we select that and we click it, this is what happens to the text by moving our mouse from the left or to the right. Then we've got the flip tool that will flip it around. Now it flips it from left to right, but if you hold Control, it will flip it from up and down. Then we've got the perspective tool. If you click inside here, you can change this manually, and that will change the perspective of the image. Let's go back to reset. Then we've got this one, the 3D transform tool. Then if you click inside the image and you move your mouse wheel button away, so this is from left to right or from up and down, and you can just basically edit this in a 3D type of space. Right, reset again. And then we've got the handle transform tool, which will allow us to just click inside the image. And then if I hold the end of the image and I move it around, it means that this is basically the pivot point, and then this is the point from where it will be edited. Okay, reset. Then we've got some other effects, but I won't go into those in this tutorial because this is basically all you need. So once you're done with your text, then you can add in the effects. Because if you don't, and let's say you want to change how this looks, so we're going to make it like so, transform, and you want to change the text of the text, and you go back to the text tool and you click inside the text, you get a pop-up saying you either need to create a new layer or you need to edit it, because this is a layer that has already been edited or modified using other tools. If we click edit, it goes back to its default value again, but at least it allows us to edit this word. All right, so that's a very easy way how to work with text. Now, let's say that we want to change this color afterwards, okay? Right now it's black, but I want it to be white. By the way, if you click inside here, you can choose any color that you like, okay? So just change it to a color that you like and then click OK. And then the color can be added to the history stack as well, okay? So right now I've got purple, so let's click the bucket fill tool. Let's click purple again. Now we've got purple and a white text. And I want this text to be standing out much better. I can go up here, go right mouse button, And then this gives us all kinds of options like edit text on layer, edit layer attributes, blend space, blah, blah, blah. We can create a new layer group, but we can also create a layer mask, which I'll tell about in a minute. But most important is that you select alpha to selection, because that will select all the text and that will allow you to, let's say, create a drop shadow. So let's go to select, because we have a selection. So we go to select, and in this case, I want to grow it. And I want to grow it with a number of 3 pixels. I'm going to click OK. And I want that growth to be filled with a black color. If I do that right now, so I go to edit and then fill with background color, we don't see the white text anymore because everything is in black. Now let me undo that by hitting Ctrl C. In this case, I want the text to be outlined by black, which means that I need a new layer. So if we click here, new layer, and we are going to call this grow. I'm going to click OK. That will allow us to go to edit, fill with background color, and then it'll allow us to drag this underneath the tutorial layer. And once we've done that, we need to go to select none. And now we see that our text is outlined by a black 3 pixel wide layer. Okay. Now, why it's important to go to select and none is because if you want other things to be edited in the image and you still have the word tutorial selected, then that means only this area will be affected. It's one of the most common mistakes beginners make, and it's very easy to prevent. Now, if you want to do this again, we can select grow layer, right mouse button, alpha to selection. In this case, let's say we are going to grow it with 6 pixels. I'm going to create a new layer. Let's call this grow 2. I'm going to click OK. And I want a contrast color, the opposite of, let's say, purple. So that will be green. I'm going to go to edit, fill with foreground color, drag it beneath it. And here we go. So now we've got our text outlined in black and green. Now, as far as layers go, because you saw me create a new layer for all of these 2 text effects, if you click here, this pop-up will show up. And that will give you some settings to work with. So you can give it a layer name, you can color tag it, you can change the mode from normal to dissolve or to darken only or to overlay, which I'll show you in a minute how that works or what the different effect is. And you can fill in other values. I'm going to click cancel, but you can also change the mode over here from normal to what I said, overlay, soft layer, whatever you need at that moment in time. Now let me quickly pull up something else and then continue with the second part of this tutorial. So here's a photo I shot of me, and now I want to remove the background and I want to keep myself in, right? Because I want myself to be placed on top of this thumbnail. And if I just use this, so let me show you another trick that you can do. You can grab the layer, go to the other image that you were working with, and then drop it here. You will see that I am covering everything. If I place myself beneath this, I will be covered by the existing image. Now place it on top of it. You won't see the text anymore. And if I place myself under the text, you will see the text, but you won't see the background anymore. So that means I need to cut myself out. And for that, we have different tools in GIMP, right? Now, the finest way to do this and the most easy way, in my opinion, is by using the paths tool. If you click that, that will allow you to create a path by just clicking around myself. So if I select myself like so, and then do that throughout the entire image, I will show you how that looks. Now, while I'm doing this, I figured I need to show you something else as well. Now, let's say you've created this path, but you want to adjust this point. You can just click it and then drag it out or drag it in. Now, if you want to add in another point, hold Control, click it, and that will give you another point to work with. Now, once you've created the final point, you need to go to the first point, hit Control, and then click it. And that will close down the path or the mask that you've created. Now, it's important to hit Enter, and that will give you these moving ons. So that will create a selection of what you just created. And now there's a couple of things you can do to isolate yourself from this image. The first way what you can do is you can go to Edit and then click Copy and then go to Edit and then Paste as New Layer. That will create a new layer with just you, okay? Now, a different way how you can do this, so let me undo that, is by going to Select, Invert, and then hitting Delete. But Now you see we have a black background. If that's something that you don't mind, then that's fine. But what's better to do, because you just want yourself to be left over, is to go up here, right mouse button, and make sure that Add Alpha Channel is selected. Click that. Now let's try it again. See, now the background is gone and I'm still left here. Another way how you can do this is by going to Edit and then Cut, and that will cut yourself out. And then you can go to Edit, Paste As, New Layer, or a new image if you want to use it as a new image. Or you can go up here and then you go to Edit and then Paste As, New Layer, for instance. And here we have myself without the background. So that's one way how you can do this. But first, let me duplicate this image. Then select the second clip. Let's click copy. Let's click paste as new layer so that we have the layer here as well. So now that we're done, we need to make sure that we deselect our selection. So we'll go to select, none. And we still see these, right? I don't want to see those. So the easiest way is to just go to the move tool and now it's gone. But let's say you want to see the path again because you want to change something. Well, that's where this comes in handy. You go to the path menu and that will show you the path that you have created. And you can activate it or deactivate it. And with the right mouse button, you can go to duplicate path or new path or edit your path. And that will allow you to edit those points to refine your masking. Okay. So that's one way how to do that. So let's go back to the layers menu. Let's click the move tool again, or let's make sure that we don't see that. Here we go. So that's one way how you can do that, right? Now a different way to cut yourself out from the image is by using the foreground select tool. If you click that, you've got a couple of options on the bottom here. Now one of them is draw on the foreground, draw on the background, draw unknown. I'm going to click draw foreground, and that requires us to select our foreground by just creating this path. And the same principle applies here. Once you're at the end, hold Control, click the first point, and then we've got our path. Let's click enter. So now I need to draw over the foreground. So I'm going to increase the stroke width so that it's more visible for you. By the way, I'm zooming in by holding Control and then scrolling the mouse wheel button away from me to zoom in and towards me to zoom out. And now I'm just going to paint over myself. And by the way, my color is green, but yours is probably black or white. So don't worry about those differences. It's just the mechanics that I'm trying to explain here. You can change the stroke width if there's something that you need to refine as well. And then once you've done that, make sure you select draw background as well. So you can draw over the background. And then once you've done that, click the enter, and that will give you a preview. And now you can click select, and that will select that mask. Now same principle applies. Go up here, go to copy, then go to paste as new layer. And here we have our new layer. Click select, none, with the technique that we've just used. This is a little bit more refined than the other one. As you can see, there's a slight difference. So whatever has your preference, be sure to use that one. Okay, so let's move on to the next part of this tutorial, which is using layers, right? So let's select this layer again and deselect the other ones. So here we have our original layer. I'm just going to select this layer. So now we have our original layer. I'm going to use some layer masks just to show you an effect. But for that, I need an extra image. So here I have a stock photo of a city that I'm going to use. So because let's say we're going to make a vlog about this city, right? So I'm just going to place that underneath the other layer because that's what we need when I want to show you how the layer masks work. Now in GIMP, you have two types of layer masks. You have the white layer mask, you have the black layer mask, and those are basically the most important ones that you need to learn. Now you've also got the transfer layers, alpha channel, selection, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, we're just going to go with white and black. Now, if we use white with full opacity, that means that everything inside this image is visible. And with this layer selected, so make sure you click inside this, you can add in or remove things from this image by using the black or white color. So in this case, it's selected to black. I'm going to click the brush tool. I've got a fairly big size, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'll make it bigger. And we can change the hardness and the force. Now right now it's on 6. So if I paint over the flamingo with my brush, my white brush, you see that the flamingo starts to disappear and the layer beneath it, so the city, this one, is starting to appear. But it's very gradual, right? If I undo that by hitting Ctrl Z and I increase the hardness to, let's say, 100 and the force as well, it's instantly. And there are very sharp edges when you do that. And that's why I like to use something a little less hard with a little less force, because then the transition is much smoother and you don't see all those sharp edges, right? This allows you to do it more gradually. So that's why I like it. Now let's say you've painted like so and you made a mistake. So you want to get rid of this again. What you can do is you can change the color up here by just clicking this button. So it goes from black foreground color to white foreground color. And then the white goes from the background to the foreground. And then if you paint over this part again, you see that the original layer starts to reappear again. And why is this useful? Because sometimes when you create something or you paint over something to make it appear or disappear, you don't really like those edges or you want to fade it out a bit again. This is the way how you can do that. So that's it for the white layer. Now let me delete that by clicking there and then delete layer mask. Now let's go with the black one. So add layer mask, black, full transparency, add. Now what happens is that the layer beneath it is visible and the layer on top of it is no longer visible. But with white selected and your brush, and then let's increase the hardness just to make it more clear, I can paint over an area, so myself, to make myself appear again and keep the rest of the image underneath it. Now same principle applies. Let's say I've just added in too much and I just want to add in myself rather than anything on the background. What I can do here is just change this again and then paint over the areas I don't want to keep anymore, to just make sure that it's just me that you're seeing. Now obviously you can decrease or increase the size of the brush to make it more refined, but you get my point. And this principle applies to anything. So whether you have an object or a person or different images, you can always use a layer mask. And I'll show you an example right now. This is a thumbnail I made for the Purely Resolve channel, so my other channel where I make videos on DaVinci Resolve. And this is what you see. So these are all the different types of layers. So these are my text layers. Let me bring them back again. This is me. And then I've got the arrow. And then I've got the background, etc. Now here you see where I've used the black layer and I've painted it over in white to bring out this, right? So this is very softly, but it just gives the viewer or the one that is looking at this thumbnail an idea where they need to be within DaVinci Resolve. And I did that by using the layer. Now, if I click on the right mouse button and I go to disable layer mask, you will see that this is the original image and it's much more sharp, and obviously that doesn't look good. So that's why I made this mask, right? All right, so the next part of this image is touching up an image, right? So here we have my face. Make sure you have the top layer selected because we've got all kinds of different layers. But let's say the top layer, right? And I see this red spot and I want to get rid of this red spot. I can use the clone tool, but I can also use the healing tool. And let's click the healing tool. Let's hit Control, click inside this image. So this is our donor area. And then just click on this spot. Now that spot is gone and it has been touched up. You can go throughout the entire image to make sure that you get rid of unwanted spots that you don't want in your image anymore. And that way you can get rid of some acne or zits or whatever you don't want inside that image. Maybe a speck of dust. Let's see if we have a speck of dust. Yes, we have. So Control click and then click on here and or paint over it. There we go. And now that spot is gone, right? So that's how you can use the healing tool. If you use the clone tool, what will happen is that you get a donor area. So let's say here, Control click, this is your donor area. And then if you click inside here, that will get the same structure from there. Now, if you hold your mouse button and you go to the side, then you see that the donor area is following alongside that. So keep that in mind because those are the two differences between the clone and the healing tool. So for the next part, let's say we work with a green screen, right? What we can do right now is, because these are now two separate layers, we can merge ourselves down by hitting right mouse button and then merge down. And now those two layers are together again, right? They are created into one layer. Now, if I want to get rid of the green screen, we need this fuzzy select tool and we can click inside here. and that will automatically place a mask because it selects all the pixels of the same color. Now in this case, when you do something like that, I like to go to select, row, click 1, because that will just refine the mask edge, and then hit delete. And now you see that everything is deleted and we only have ourselves. And then by that way, we can just go up here, grab a different background, throw it beneath here, put it under myself, and now we change the background from a green screen to this background right here. Now if you want to add text to this, or you want to move yourself around, you can. So if I place myself up here, I grab the text tool, let's make it white, let's click in here, let's call this city hopping exclamation mark, select everything, let's make it bigger, or let's make it even more bigger because we have the room, and then put it over here, rotate it a bit, here we go. Now we see that we've added text. Now if we move the text as it is right now, it's going to be placed behind me because this layer is on top of the text layer. Then if I change that, you'll see that the text is now on top of me. Right. So now that you understand the basics and such, it's time to do something creative, because right now you see that me, let's deselect text layer. You see that me and the background are the same sharpness, right? But I want myself to be standing out from the background, or in other words, I don't want the background to draw the attention away from me. So in order for us to do that, we need to blur the background. Now, what we can do is go to filters, and this is where you find all the filters. So blur, enhance, so you can sharpen it, or you can do some noise reduction. You can distort the image. We've got light and shadows, where we can add a drop shadow, for instance, and we've got all kinds of different effects. Now in this case, if we go to blur, we've got focus blur, Gaussian blur, lens blur, and I'm going to use Gaussian blur, and that will allow us to just change the strength of this effect. So if we just make it like 7, for instance, click OK, you see that now the background is blurred out and I'm standing out. Now, let's undo that by hitting Ctrl Z, go back to blur again, and then Gaussian blur because I want to show you something. Let's increase the effect again. And now let's say you want to know what the before and after was. You can go up here to split view, and that will bring this up, and that will allow you to just move this from left to right, or from right to left, or however you want to see it before and after, to see what looks better. Okay, once you're done, click OK, and then the effect is being applied to the layer that you have selected. So that's a very important one. All right, so the next part of this tutorial is that I'm going to show you how to work with some colors. But before we start, I'm going to click here, duplicate this layer again, and then I'm going to go to colors, and then we've got all the things that we can pick. So color balance, color temperature, hue chroma, hue saturation, etc. So if I want to change the exposure, I'm going to click exposure. That will allow us to increase the black level, or to decrease the black level, or to increase the exposure, or to decrease the exposure. And if you want to reset everything, just click reset, and then the entire image will be reset. Now, depending on the speed of your computer, this will be much faster or a bit slower. Let's click cancel. Let's go to colors. You can work with the curves over here. So let's say we want to give it more contrast by dropping the shadows and increasing the highlights for the S curve. And this is a way to do it. And then here we have a before on the right hand side, and then we have an after on the left hand side. And once you start adding those changes I explained to you a second ago, it's important to use new layers, because you can basically stack them in theory if that's what you want to. But let's say you want to change the colors over here and you don't want the sky, or you want a certain part to be black and white rather than something else. It's always better to get a new layer and then use a layer mask to get the desired effect. Okay, let's continue with the tutorial. But we can also change the hue. So if we go to colors, hue saturation, we have the ability to use presets. We can change the master, so that changes everything. So the entire image is being affected with these sliders. Or you can go like, look, I just want the reds or the yellows, for instance, to change. So that will just change that part of the image. Now, obviously this looks horrible, but it's just for demonstration purposes only. You can also change the saturation of the entire image, or to desaturate it to get yourself a black and white image. And then you have the color balance one, which gives you more individual control over the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights, for instance. So we can change the cyan, for instance. We can increase the reds, or we can decrease the reds to make the image more cooler. I actually like the warmer look. There we go. Then once again, split view. So here's a before, here's an after. It's very subtle, but it's definitely there. You can increase the contrast as well by going to colors and then go to brightness and contrast, where you can increase the contrast of the image so that it stands out more. So anything you want to do creatively with an image is done in the colors tab when it comes to colors, and then when it comes to filters, it's in the filters tab. Then another thing I wanted to show you is that, let's say we've got these text layers, okay? So these are actually 4 layers. We can group them together by clicking this symbol, which will give us a layer group, and then I could just drag them inside of here, which means that if I deactivate this layer or activate this layer, everything will be shown or gone rather than each step individual. So that's a great way how you can actually organize this entire place, because sometimes you have like 20 to 50 layers, and then to make sure you're still organized, this is the tool to use for that. And that concludes my introductory tutorial to GIMP. I hope you guys like it. Let me know if it was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.